Should newborn Christians immediately go out and start trying to teach people, try to fulfill the Great Commission, go and make disciples in the whole world? In my opinion, no. And here's why. Jesus taught his disciples for 3 to 3.5 years before he told them to go do this, and he gave them power to do it. Paul, after his conversion, he did try to immediately speak in the synagogues, but was rejected pretty much because of his reputation. He went away to Arabia, according to his own writings in Galatians. He went to Arabia for 3 years, and many speculate it was to deepen his understanding of what he had just experienced. You know, he knew the Old Covenant law, the Judaism, all that stuff. He knew that like the back of his hand. He had it memorized. He had the Bible pretty much, the Old Testament, or at least the 5 books of the Bible, first 5 books, the Torah, memorized, studied, very good. So some speculate that he spent those 3 years rereading through the lens of Jesus. So after 3 years, then he went and met Peter. He didn't even meet the other disciples yet. He just went and met Peter, went back to his place for another 11 years. He says in the very first part of the 2nd chapter of Galatians that after 14 years had passed, then he went back to Jerusalem and met with Peter and the rest of the disciples, told them what he'd been teaching, what he'd learned, and they agreed that he was teaching exactly what they were teaching. And he said that I didn't learn any of this from man, I learned it from God. So what he was doing was he was in the Word and he was in prayer, building his relationship and his knowledge with God and Jesus. Another great example is Jesus. You know, he grew from an infant and he grew up until, you know, he started his ministry in his 30s. But even we're told at 12, he was in the temple reading the scriptures with and talking with all the teachers, and they were amazed at how much he knew at that point. But then it goes on to say, and this is in Luke, it says he grew in wisdom and in favor with God and with man. So Jesus was still learning and growing. So I think those are good examples. Paul told Timothy to make sure that he passed down all that he had learned to all the people underneath him that he was teaching. In Titus, he told Titus to make sure that the older men and women were teaching the younger men and women, the newer people too. So those are some great reasons, as far as I'm concerned, to not immediately go out and start teaching. Why is this important? Well, it's called newborn. It's called born again. So if you look in 1 Peter, he even says, as a newborn believer, desire as an infant would the milk of the word so that you can grow. So, and think about this too. Think about whatever job maybe you have, or job or career you want. Let's say you want to be a doctor. You don't just show up at the hospital and start doctoring. You want to be a lawyer? You don't just show up at the courthouse and say, I'm here, who needs my help? You don't be a teacher. So say you want to be a teacher. You don't just show up at school or a college and start teaching. You have to go be taught. You have to learn. You have to spend the time to learn. And it's true with any job. Even being a policeman or a fireman, you have to go through a training period. You don't just jump out there and do the things. Now, am I saying that keep everything to yourself? No. If you're a newborn, you're going to be excited. If you're newly born again, you just want to tell everybody and do that. But just do it as, look what I found, look what just happened to me. Not don't do things like, well, it says here, and you need to be like this, and you don't need to be doing that. You shouldn't be doing that. Those things, you're not ready for that. And I can think of some examples too of newborn Christians getting so excited, and then it reminds me of the sower, the parable of the sower. Okay, check it out. You've got the sower, one sower, God. You have seed, the same seed is in his hand, right? That gets spread out through all these 4 different types of ground. The seed is the word. So one sower, God, the seed, his word. Now the difference is you got four different types of ground. One is rocky, one is in a path where it can get trampled on, one grows up but it's in thorns and it chokes it out, and then one is in good soil and it ends up growing. Well, so I think a lot of newborn believers, they maybe fall in that third category. They're excited and they want to go out and do things for the kingdom and for God, and then things start choking out their zeal. Like, here's an example. Maybe you want to start teaching somebody something, and they might ask you a legitimate question. You don't have an answer for them. All of a sudden, you might feel embarrassed. You might feel discouraged. That happened to me. When I started this channel, I wasn't ready to teach, but I knew I wanted to help. So, I found teachers. I found David at first, and now I'm with Ken. And Ken has helped me so much to even get to a place where I feel like I can even do these kind of videos. Just reading scripture and just really just learning it and just reading it over and over and just getting it so ingrained in me that I feel like I can just, have a little bit better of a grasp on it. But think about famous musicians, artists. They have some born again experience, but they're in this worldly thing. Well, they come out and they might preach God, but they're still going out and doing their concerts. They're still singing pretty bad songs. And I've heard it from rock to pop to rap, hip hop, heavy metal, country. I've heard of all that happen. Here's how I want to end this. I wrote this down so I could say it properly. If you're a newborn believer, and you know what? Even if you're not a newborn believer, maybe you've been born again for a while, but you're still kind of in an infant state. I was that for years and years. So this even applies to you. So I wrote this down. Get in the Word and prayer like Jesus did, like the disciples did, like Paul did, and let those roots grow deep.